See, the barrel cleaning was pretty straightforward. I use a pull-through tool that I make from a trim line, weed whacker line, looped at the end and then melted together. Put cotton swabs in the back end and just pull through till it comes through clean. But now it's time to tackle disassembling and lubricating, cleaning and lubricating the hammer system and the bolt system. So we're going to have to remove the upper part of the gun from the stock, which is just 2 screws. Front and back. The front one is the longer screw. When you go to put them off to the side, that's a good thing to note. They're the same thread, but the one that goes towards the back of the stock is much shorter than the front one. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the lockdown screw that keeps pressure against the hammer adjustment screw, which is accessed through here. I've gone through this in the power adjusting video that I did, but I'm going to take that completely out. The bolt has to be moved backwards. To access it, I believe it's 2 millimeter. Then I'm going to release the hammer from the cock position. Now that that's out, you want to remove the bolt handle. That is 3 millimeter. Now we're going to try to take off the back side of this trigger assembly. So if you watch Brothers in Air video, you'll learn that the trigger assembly is held in by 2 pins, pressed in pins. One here and one here. Now, I've watched and rewatched his video, and the side he pounds his pins out from and the side he puts them back in from are completely the opposite of what mine came out. Mine had to be pounded out from the side with the gun turned so the pressure gauge is facing up. Like I said, I've rewatched his video and it's exactly the opposite. They will only come out from one side. So basically, and it won't take a whole lot of pressure as far as a punch and a small hammer. I use this little awl and this little hammer. If you're tapping and giving a good firm tap from one side and it's not moving, try flipping your gun over and doing it from the other side. But obviously, I would recommend reinstalling them the same way that they came out. But mine just happened to be exactly the opposite of Brothers in Air. The next step would be removing the retaining cap for the hammer. As you see, I've marked mine with white paint marker on the gun housing itself and on the cap. It has a large slot in it. I am going to be using I have a very large headed screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, which I'm going to use. Brothers in Air uses a quarter. So to get that cap screw out, the hammer spring sits inside of it. That's screwed in right here. There is a 2mm set screw, grub screw, that tightens down against it to keep it from moving. Make sure you back that off. I didn't, and I was getting the cap screw for the hammer to turn, but kind of marked it up. I'm going to polish that out with my Dremel tool. But if you're trying to get this to turn and it isn't easily, stop. That's probably your problem. That grub screw hasn't been backed off. As soon as I did that, it unscrewed very easily. And what you get this assembly with your hammer, this debouncing piece, for the hammer in the middle and on top of the bolt. Now I'm just going to clean all these up. They've got whatever Hatsan uses as lubricant. The next step was some dry graphite lubricant. Very sparingly, I applied a thin layer onto the hammer. And now it's pretty much ready for reassembly. So everything's been reinstalled. One of the things I want to point out, if you look at that end cap, my markings are not lined up with one another. And the reason for that is because I hadn't backed out the set screw that locks down that end cap, and I was trying to turn it unsuccessfully. I galled up the slot somewhat, so I flat sanded that, not realizing I was flat sanding off the mark I had made on it. But what I found out, going back and watching Brothers in Air video, he mentions that his end cap has 2 flats on it. And you can adjust the preload on your hammer spring, not only through the hole in the middle of the end cap. There's a screw in the center of the hammer. There's a recessed area that the hammer spring goes into in the back of the hammer. And in the middle of the hammer is a threaded hole with the screw that, again, you turn counterclockwise, and that increases tension on the spring and will increase your power. You want to tune for more shots and decrease power, you would screw that screw in. But along with that screw in the middle of the hammer, you have the end cap over here. And how far that's going to go in is going to put tension on your spring. But he mentions in his video that his end cap has 2 flats, and what you want to make sure is that the flat is facing up towards your bolt. At least one of your flats. Now, my end cap only has 1 flat. Now, he mentions the ability to adjust the pretension on your hammer spring with the end cap, but that it would work in half-turn increments. Well, with this only having 1 flat, that's only going to work in full-turn increments. And what I found out was the way that it all goes back together and assembles properly, and this end cap does screw in the same amount it was before I took it apart, regardless of where the mark is. You go in an extra half turn or full turn, and it's obvious that it's in too far. You screw it out a half turn or a full turn, and it's obvious that it was screwed back too far. If it's screwed back too far, it's not going to go back in the stock. So it's back in the same amount that it was. My power should be what it was. I'll have to test that and get a velocity reading. But everything, the trigger assembly just drops back in. You line up the holes and put the pins in, again, from the same side they were pushed out from. And again, mine was the opposite of what Brothers in Air was. So keep that in mind. At this particular point, the only thing I have left to do is put the very small 2mm set screw back in. That tightens down against the screw that's in the middle of the hammer and locks it in place. I took the cheek rest off, which you really don't have to do, but I got it out of the way, so I have to reattach that. And then get it all reattached to the stock. What I've been doing is actuating the bolt back and forth, and my goodness, it does seem a lot less rough than it did. definitely an improvement in the action of the bolt. So let me get the rest of this put back together, and I'll have to get to testing the velocity. So I took a shot, 1181. And that was again with the 7.2 grain Beeman pellets. So it's actually shooting a little bit higher than it was. Like I said, I was able to get 1160. Whether or not, I'm assuming the hammer is striking with more force than it was. But getting back to that, one thing I wanted to point out was I did print up, I always think this is a good idea for any gun. If you go to the manufacturer's website, in this case I went to Hatsan USA, they do have a parts diagram for the Hatsan Flashpup. Anytime you're going to work on anything, I recommend doing this. It's just always nice to have, you have no idea when a small part that fits inside of another part is going to come out and just fall out. And you're not really sure where it fell out from. These parts diagrams are really, really good in showing you, okay, I've got a round sleeve. Actually, this happened. When I disassembled everything, as far as the bolt and the anti-bounce bar that goes in between the bolt and the hammer, when I removed those three, which come out all at the same time, a little metal ring sleeve fell out of the hammer. And I believe, well, I don't necessarily believe, I could tell from the parts diagram exactly where it went. It goes on top of that hammer spring adjustment screw, so that the spring is actually not sitting up against the screw, but it's sitting on that sleeve. But it's here. It's on the parts diagram. It fell out of the hammer. It fell on my floor. Fortunately, it was out in the open where I could see it. Exactly where it went, I could tell from the parts diagram. So I really recommend doing that, regardless of what gun you have. Go to the manufacturer's site and see if they supply a parts diagram for your gun. If they do, print it up and keep it. So, as you can see, I did take a shot with a much heavier pellet, a 10.5 grain Crossman Premier, and it shot 1080, and that upped the power number to over 27 foot-pounds of energy. So, I'm seeing some benefits, as well as physically feeling the benefits of a smoother bolt action, properly lubricated hammer. And what I have here is a box filled with some 177 pellets that I ordered. Everything from budget friendly pellets to some slugs, actually. So that'll be for the next video, as far as getting around to shooting these and testing these. So until that one, thanks for checking out this video, guys. Shoot straight and stay safe.